Issue 189. Tails asks Rotor why the glow posts in the lab turned on by themselves, and Rotor says he doesn't understand why because they're supposed to only cross dimensions into the special zone. Why'd he call it that instead of the Zone of Silence? I don't remember Feist saying that he changed the name of that place to that. And again, why couldn't Scourge just use his warp ring instead of wasting time making Boomer use glow posts of their own to come here? It's just then when Boomer comes out of the glow post portal and he's called Anti-Rotor, which is a better name of course, less hokey to call him Anti than Evil whatever, since why would they ever agree to names like that? But what's weird about this is that the Evil Twins have never been called Anti before, to my recollection. It's always been Evil this, Evil that. So why did Rotor not just call him Evil Rotor? Boomer says that he goes by Boomer now, which makes more sense for an evil twin of his since that makes him sound like he's explosion happy. He calls him a wuss and asks if he's scared that his shadow is outshining him, putting shadow in quotation marks as if Rotor ever called him that. I can understand why Scourge would have this superiority-inferiority complex with his twin, but why Boomer? He only met Rotor a grand total once and was given no reason to believe Rotor was better than him, or thought he was. Did Scourge's own rantings get to him that easily? He taunts Rotor that he can't even stand up to him as Tails protectively tells him to leave him alone, and then a yellow blur whose face is drawn completely yellow for the laziness' sake tells him resentfully to know his place, out of nowhere. When Miles is called Anti-Tails, again that comes out of nowhere when he should have been called Evil Tails. He gets really offended for some reason, saying, "Don't you dare call me that! You may lack self-respect, but I answer only to Miles." So again, did Scourge's rantings about his own twin get to him? Miles never even implied that he was having an issue with being a twin of his sharing his nickname, and now he's talking all passionately against it. And not only that, but he talks as if Tails calling himself Tails was a sign that he lacked self-respect. This comes completely out of nowhere. Although then again, we never got any development on the characters of the Evil Twins, so I guess that can be excused. And him saying this so suddenly seems to imply that at worst, he's projecting in psychological sense. It's more likely that he's the one who lacks self-respect. Because if he had it, he'd be okay with himself and his mutation enough to call himself Tails, instead of hating any nickname that reminds himself that he has an extra limb. He gets Tails down to the floor by kicking him and holding his hand. Ah yes, holding hands, what an enemy thing to do. And when Alicia is nice enough to say, "Nice work, boys," Miles is nice enough to say, "Thank you," and then refer to her as her full royal title. Neither of them had to go through that much trouble for each other. Miles especially didn't have to thank her, but the two were good enough friends to do that anyways. They already are the first villain team to show a genuine friendship of some sort, as subtle as it is because they don't want to look like softies in front of their enemies. Also, it's a little weird that Miles, the last time we saw him, was casually calling his friends girls, and now he's referring to Alicia all formally. It's like he had a complete personality transplant, just because Scourge showed up. Alicia has stress lines under her eyes, as if she's either not getting enough sleep, or is just really stressed out. And since she didn't have those in her earlier appearances, it's probably just from her being all resentful that Fiona's the one in charge. As she asks, "Patch, if you'd be so kind as to inform Her Highness that the area is secure." Again, she's being polite to Patch with the way she talks to him. Fiona, for some reason, goes through the portal hand and head first instead of just walking through it like a normal person, and naturally is annoyed again at Alicia acting just as resentful for her as Sally did, saying, "And you better watch your tone, princess." I wonder if she had been disappointed that Alicia hated her the minute she showed up, because Sally at least had a reason to reject her and be judgmental, while Alicia and the Evil Twins in general were like a new start, only for a whole group of potential new friends to hate her on sight. She reveals that the anti-freedom fighters are now called the more fitting name of the Suppression Squad, which I wonder why they haven't called themselves that already, and orders them to move forwards. Wasn't it nice of Scourge to make Fiona the one in charge of all the other Evil Twins on almost equal status with him? He could have easily just made her be the same rank as everyone else, treating her like a subordinate, instead of treating her like a queen. Back at New Megapolis, we see the Chaotix running from some Dark Legion goons, with Julie shooting a ray gun and Espio throwing shurikens. And Sonic says that because they've got them on the run already, he thinks the new Dark Egg Legion is a joke, because they didn't even need him. Knuckles doesn't laugh because he thinks he's responsible for them existing. No, Finidivus was, and Leonidas selling out was. Sonic is just as exasperated with Knuckles as I am, saying, "Oh, don't start this again." It reminds him that he was just under a spell. And the goons chose to sell themselves out to Robotnik for no real reason, themselves. Knuckles says that just because the goons are some of the only echidnas left, he should try to help them. Sheesh. I mean, I guess it is a guardian tradition thing, but... And he says he needs to get to their leader and ask someone to cover for him. Alicia tells Patch that he has to come with her because there's more freedom fighters out there, and Patch, actually saying "my princess" in French correctly, were it not for the lack of an E at the end of the second word, says that she worries too much, and calls the heroes a word that I looked up on the internet and couldn't find the meaning of at all, meaning that they just flat out made up a French-sounding word for him to say, or they horribly misspelled a real one. I can only assume he called them wusses, as he says that they're no real threat, only to immediately get threatened by a vicious-looking Amy who tries to attack him while he says, "My God!" She naturally calls him out, "You got a lot of nerve coming back here after all you've done." Exactly. She runs after him, saying cathartically, "Come back so I can smash you!" And Patch runs away, saying the girl's a monster. Oh yeah, she's the monster, sure. And Alicia deadpans idiot, since he didn't take the hero seriously enough like she did as the smart one. Also, Alicia's going to be wearing a different outfit later too. They can never decide what outfits to give the evil twins. Funny grabs her arm from behind out of nowhere, and Alicia is sarcastic with her pretending to be polite while they stand in the middle of a white void since the artist got lazy. Patch screams in the background, and Buddy tells Amy to save some of him for the rest of the heroes because Antoine and her have personal reasons to hate him. Honestly, I wish that Patch could have just stayed in Mobius and just stayed in a prison there after all this was done, because that would have felt like a really fitting punishment for him. Instead, he seems to completely get away with everything. Alicia taunts her that she's wasting her talents because she's way out of her league, and Bunny says that a threat's a threat, so they're both acknowledging that Alicia is the last thing she should be worrying about. Boomer shoots her with a ray gun attached to his arm by a backpack, with Alicia saying to show her what happens to those who ignore him, showing respect for him. Sally then says that if they're looking for someone in their league, her schedule is open, kicking Alicia in the back since she didn't bother to turn around in time. Fiora complains that things are already going south and orders Miles to keep an eye on Tails and Rotor, calling Tails a brat out of nowhere because we're supposed to hate her, and I guess she wants to detach herself from Tails as much as possible by demonizing him. Then she promptly streaks a little at Antoine threatening her with a sword. Antoine is making her scared? I guess she's cynical and paranoid enough to just assume he'd actually use it on her? Antoine for some reason thinks he should ask Fiona why she's with the evil twins. Ask a stupid question much? Then Fiona says the confusing line just about the same as you, Twan. I'm going after the lady in charge. And taps the metal wall for some reason, immediately going from looking intimidated by a sword to smirking not intimidated in the span of 2 panels. That was consistent. And what the hell does she mean by that first line? She went to the evil twin zone voluntarily. Why does this Dark Legion goon look like a blue alien blob instead of being red like an actual echidna would? Another goon says to protect the Commissar. I wasn't aware that Lando's nickname had a "the" in front of it. Mighty immediately sends him flying with super strength, and Sonic uses a spin dash as Knuckles glides up to Lando, who's sitting in an Eggmobile. Knuckles idealistically thinks he can reason with her, telling her it doesn't have to be this way and she can give the Dark Legion a chance of peace. Lando says that he can't possibly know what's best for them when his ancestors never did, and she doesn't properly respond to Knuckles saying, "But working for the Eggman Empire?" and then not explaining why she should be opposed to it since she doesn't know. But why doesn't she just say that the Dark Legion wants power and world domination? Snively tells her that there are no reinforcements for her because she's the standing army now, and Knuckles looks kinda cute, smiling nervously at her as she frowns at him. She tells the Dark Legion to fall back because they've lost this position, and Julie explains to Knuckles she was never much of a listener, never much of a sister either. Then Sonic puts his arm around him in a sweet friendship moment with him and tries to reassure Knuckles that maybe Lando will straighten out once Eggman City is taken over by the heroes. Taking over, that's a weird way to phrase it when you know you're in the right. I hate that Knuckles looks like he's drawn with a long girly eyelash in this panel though. At least he's smiling a little, appreciating it. I wouldn't expect that of him. Sonic tells him as he looks depressed to give himself a break and leave the brooding angst to Shadow. Exactly! Though it's annoying how Sonic keeps calling Shadow angsty, because while it works as a meta joke since the fans characterize him that way, the actual comic barely showed Shadow showing angst and emotional damage, if at all. All he did was react to Hope as Maria. big deal. Vector tells everyone they did good work because the sector is secure, and asks how their second team's doing. He hasn't really annoyed me in a pretty long time. I don't think I really hate him anymore. Julie then checks in on that team by talking to a Bluetooth that's actually a part of her cybernetic dreadlock thing. So they finally made some sort of a use for it. Charmy's weird-looking fiance tells her in response that Ray and Charmy are almost done setting all the landmines, or charges as she calls them for some reason. She says triumphantly that when they blow this tower, Eggman won't be able to make contact with half the continent. They're told to leave and meet them at the rendezvous point, and then she gets approached by Lando and an army of goons and says nervously that she's going to need some backup. After an explosion is heard, Amy admits that she needs some backup too, and Sally says that they need to call Sonic back. Boomer complains about that making an idiot of himself since he should know he can't change their minds, and Bunny cathartically sends him into a wall saying, "Nobody asked you!" Then Patch and Antoine start sword fighting, and Alicia taunts Amy about her actual age while actually using her whip for the purpose of wrapping it around her camera and making her fall backwards. Since she knows an Amy in her own dimension, it makes sense that she'd know Amy's actually pretty young. Fiona then has some really poorly written dialogue where she kicks Sally calling her a sugar queen even though Sally's been the exact opposite of that to her. She's more of an ice queen in fact. Not to mention that kick was really unsatisfying because it's just a yellow light covering up the actual impact. And then the really poorly written part comes in, because her insult to her is so weak. All she does is point out the obvious. I mean, yeah, Sally's not as fast as her ex-boyfriend, no shit. Thank you, Almo Chow. If she was actually written competently, she'd say something like, "You ran faster after you slapped Sonic." That would have actually taken advantage of the concept that she's a former friend of hers, who never had any friendship moments because laziness of the writing, but still. Instead, she's written like a generic villain. It's bland and lazy. Sally says with a terrifying evil smirk that could give Alicia a run for her money that she's just part of the cover. As Miles and Tails are having an aerial kick fight, Rotor is telling Nicole to send word to Sonic, and Julie then tells Saffron that she and her friends are on their way. The potential problem of Sonic having to choose which group of friends to help is completely solved immediately as Knuckles just says him and the Chaotix will save Charmy, letting Sonic go home. It turns out they actually have sent reinforcements for Lando, who complains that they're late, and Dimitri says he came of his own accord. She basically calls him useless, finally being honest with him instead of sucking up to him, making him look stupid for buying it. Dimitri shows responsibility by saying that it's his duty to ensure the safety of his people, and he will not sit idly by and let Lando lead them to failure and ruin. He takes command of the operation. Dimitri rallies up the goons, even saying that they shouldn't hesitate to fire on their own kind because they've abandoned them. Since when? He just said he had a duty to his own people. After Sonic arrives at the base, Fiona, calling Scourge Hun, says to him, apologizing for some reason, that he needs to speed up his grand entrance, which he took forever going here with for some reason. Was he spending the entire time combing his hair? And the story ends with Scourge showing up out of the portal. Since he only cares about fighting Sonic, it makes perfect sense that he wouldn't come out until now, because Sonic wasn't there yet. Not particularly smart though, when the fight would have been effortlessly won by his team by him alone. This issue is by Ian Flynn, and involves the evil twins invading Freedom Fighter HQ, while Knuckles, in a much less charming subplot, thinks that he can convince Lando not to work for Eggman for some reason, while not even trying to tell her why she shouldn't, and Charmy, Ray, and Saffron get in trouble with the Dark Legion during their plan to destroy a communications tower of Eggman, a great major goal of theirs. I really hope that when they succeed in it, they'll really focus on the effects of that. The cool thing is that the evil twins not only have some more unique designs and are close to having the most memorable ones, but they show complexes about being twins for the first time, implying Scourge got to them with his own complex a little, out of complete nowhere. The two things that really stood out to me were, one, how polite the evil twins were to each other when they didn't have to be, proving they're actual friends with a genuine friendship dynamic, and two, how Miles considers calling himself Tails in general as equivalent to insulting oneself, which makes sense since Tails might as well be calling himself Mutant. And it just proves that Miles is in fact the one with no self-respect, since he's not proud enough of his second tail to call himself that. Remember, Tails started calling himself Tails in the first place after he realized his tails were useful because he can fly with them. It's not just about sharing the same name as him, like with all the other evil twins. Especially since he didn't even know that there was a person sharing his name. It's not like he grew up knowing that. I really wish they just had Tails call him Evil Tails though. Not only would it be actually consistent with what he called him earlier, but it'd have a lot more impact and meaning having Miles be so offended at being called Evil Tails.